Hey, welcome to the Actor's Career Compass, where we give actionable, bite-sized tips to help you navigate your acting career. I'm your host, Martin Benson, and today we're going to be talking about how to get unstuck when you've hit a plateau. How fitting as we dive into year 2024. So have you felt like it's been a while, but you're generally booking the same kinds of work that you were a year ago or 2 years ago? Or how about 5 or 10 years ago? I know some actors who have felt stuck for over 10 years. Basically, they're still struggling to book more than the occasional co-star or guest star role on television. I know other actors who find it difficult to get auditions for anything paid, even after spending years trying different things. And of course, I know plenty of stories of actors who feel like they've tried everything, but they still can't get an agent after years. So what I'm going to share today in this episode, it might sound fairly simple, and, honestly, it is a little bit simple, but it's really, really necessary and important to hear. And what it is the reason that most people get stuck is because of their mindset and because of their systems. And we're going to dive deep on a system later in this podcast that you can use to help yourself get unstuck. But before we do that, I just want to talk briefly about mindset. Now, of course, this doesn't apply to everyone, but in the vast majority of cases, I find that actors who have gotten stuck at the same level have somehow lost their focus and just sort of gotten caught up in the day-to-day of regular life. So the fact is, if you want your career to go to the next level, then you need to get refocused. And the only way to do that is to actually figure out what that next level is for you. Okay, so essentially, if you're not spending time really being like, hey, what do I actually want in my career, right? If you're just applying to auditions and going to auditions and taking classes and doing the usual day-to-day stuff, and you don't really sit down and be like, hey, honestly, I do feel like I've been stuck. What do I really, really want? And you don't set that goal, then yeah, you're probably going to stay stuck, and pretty quickly years will have gone by. Before you know it, it's going to be the end of next year, 2024, and you're still going to feel like you're in the same place. So let's talk now about the system that I follow personally, and I recommend you try. And I've taken actors who I work with one-on-one through this system. It's essentially a simple 6-step process that you can follow to get unstuck pretty much no matter where you are at this point in your acting career. All right, so step 1, I want you to think about what you really want long term, okay? I know you've probably heard this before. Oh my gosh, it's goal setting, but it is critical, because if you don't know what you want, then how are you going to set up plans to get there, right? So, all right, step 1, think about what you really want long term. So what is your 10 to 20 year goal? What do you want your life and career to look like down the line? So write it down. The more detailed you are, the better. But I know most people don't want to spend a lot of time on this step because they've probably tried goal setting before. So at bare minimum, just write the basics. Like down the line, do you want to be acting as a lead in major Hollywood feature films? Or do you want to get a series regular role on a popular television show? Just what is your long-term 10 to 20 year goal? Now, step 2, what do you want 1 year from now? So within the context of that major long-term goal we just talked about, what do you think is a realistic but exciting year-long goal that you could set? Now you want to write that down too. But before you do that, I want you to look at the goal that you're thinking of carefully and think about the actual math behind it to make sure that it's realistic and doable within a year. Okay, so let's go through a couple of examples of this, because setting realistic goals, honestly, a lot of times people don't do this properly. You'll hear a lot from different people. They'll be like, oh, set something that's inspiring and huge because, there's no limit to what you can achieve. And while I do believe in that, I believe in that as the 10 to 20 year goal, not the 1 year goal. I used to not realize that there's a major difference between setting a realistic 1 year goal, and I would set goals that were just crazy, like, oh, I want to make $1 million or something. And it just never happened because it wasn't realistic with the model of my business. So let's talk about that. So example one. Let's pretend that your goal is to earn $300,000 per year from acting work within a year. So what would that realistically look like? How many jobs would you need to book each month on average? And what would those jobs each need to pay? So the question is that even possible? Or would a more realistic goal be maybe to earn $50,000 per year from acting, or $100,000 if you're already kind of more experienced? Think about it, do some research, find out what do average acting jobs in my range pay. If you're non-union, how much do those jobs pay? And if you are union, how much could you be getting based on the typical types of roles that you're booking? And then think about how often you would actually need to book those jobs in order to get paid the amount that you want. And then you'll know right away whether that $300,000 goal is actually doable. Now, example number two. So if your goal, let's say that you're a year from now, you didn't set a money goal, but you set a car, or like, I want this cool car type of goal, so like something that you want. So let's pretend that the car that you want is going to cost $50,000. You want to obviously figure out like how much money do I need to be able to pay for this car? Or if your goal is I want to go on a trip somewhere, how much money do I need to actually have set aside for the trip? So if your goal is to get a $50,000 car, how much money would you realistically need to start setting aside per month, starting right now, to have that money saved up so that a year from now you could buy that thing? And how much acting work would you need to book to be able to get that money set aside? Okay, so again, right now we're looking at some examples. How can I make sure that the goal that I'm setting is realistic and attainable? And if you do the calculations, you're like, actually, this is way too big, or this is not attainable yet, then set a smaller, more realistic goal first. Because a year from now, even if the goal is slightly smaller, if you reach that goal, you will be in a much better place next year to focus on a much larger goal. Okay, and you can come back and re-listen to this podcast episode again a year from now and set some new goals for yourself. So final example 3, if your year-long goal is to get a great talent agent, how many credits and how much footage would you probably need to get first? And in order to get that, how many acting gigs would you have to be booking per month on average this coming year? Right? So you have to do these calculations to see whether it's realistic. Okay. Now, step 3 in the overall system that we're talking about to get unstuck. Okay. Because we just finished step 2, which was to set your year-long goal. Step 3 is to write down all the possible ways that you can get to that year-long goal. So now you have to do some research, okay? So you can use Google, you can read articles that I've written or on other websites. If you do want some good articles that I've written, I would recommend going to Google and you type into Google the word City Headshots, which is my company, and then next to it type in resources for actors or actor resources. And an article should pop up that has links to a lot of my best articles on different topics. So like you could find out, the steps involved to get an agent or a manager, or how to get more auditions, how to prepare for auditions. All that stuff is, you can find that through that resource there. But again, you have to do the research now to figure out what steps to take to get to your year-long goal. So, for instance, if your goal is to get an acting agent, start researching how to get an acting agent. Write down everything that you'll probably need to do, like get new headshots, shoot clips for your reel, research agencies, draft cover letters, etc. Like all of that stuff. A talent agent is a great goal, but you need to be realistic with it. The worst way to go about it is to just shoot off a whole bunch of emails, like mass mail, shotgun blast your resume out there and hope for a response. It's much better to be strategic. So I recommend searching that article that I've written, How to Get an Acting Agent. You can look at that as a starting place and just write down all of the different steps that you'll probably have to take. Okay? Now, step 4 in getting unstuck is to analyze all of the steps that you've written down, okay? So now you have to actually look at everything that you wrote down to determine how much effort each step will take and how necessary or important each of those steps is. So for example, let's say you already have some decent headshots, but you read in an article somewhere that having new headshots is important to getting an agent, right? You'll ask yourself, is this going to be a lot of effort? Will it cost a lot of money? Yeah, probably. And also, is it really that important? Do I actually need this? And so then when comparing that step to other steps in your list, you might realize that, well, I have no reel footage. So between the two, paying for headshots that you already have or spending that money instead on hiring a production company for reels, which step do you think you should focus on first, right? So that analysis is going to help you figure out which steps you do need to worry about right away and which steps you don't, okay? So before we continue, I want to just tell you briefly about our reel production services for actors, since we are talking about that. If you're based in either Manhattan or northern New Jersey or nearby, we can custom write and help cast actors and shoot and even edit high-end professional footage to make your reel look very impressive to agents and casting directors. So you can visit actorscreenershoot.com, which is actor screener, SCREENER, shoot, no S at the end. So actorscreenershoot.com to see our packages and schedule a free consultation with my team. Now, step 5 out of 6 to getting unstuck is to decide which steps to do first, okay? So you've written down notes on each step when you analyze them and decide it. And now it's essentially time to organize and decide on which things to do first. You want to organize them into an action plan. So what will you be doing first, second, third? So again, if your goal is to get an agent, perhaps your first action step could be to get new reel footage, right? Now, again, you probably also may, if you're looking this up, not to get super specific on getting an agent, but you'll probably have also run across the step of you should be clear on your types and your brand, right? So obviously, if you're thinking logically about the steps, you probably don't want to pay to shoot footage until you're clear on your types and your brand, because you want to capture that in your reel. So obviously, in that case, you would probably first figure out your types, and then you would shoot your reel, okay? So then maybe after shooting the reel footage, you might start drafting some cover letter, like creating a template to use, and then start doing some research to find agents, and then start reaching out, right? I'm just giving you a very, very brief overview. This is not a podcast on how to get an agent. If you want to listen to that podcast, I think it was the first one that I ever did. Just search for how to get an agent, and you can listen to that in more depth. But yeah, basically, you organize these steps. Let's say that you're reaching out to agents, and at that point, if you don't hear back from anybody when you're reaching out, then you may come back and look at some of those steps that you skipped, like headshots, and maybe consider updating them. So the idea is you're logically putting all of the steps you came up with into order based on the notes that you made previously. Now, obviously, the last step, step 6 on getting unstuck, is to start taking action. Okay? Now, I recommend to do this as one small step per day. Okay? So you want to look at your action steps in order, and you just want to take a tiny little step. It's really amazing what you can accomplish over time if you're consistently taking small little steps. All right, so for instance, let's pretend that your first step is to shoot new reel footage. Then maybe the first action that you could take on day 1 is to just go online and spend 20 or 30 minutes searching. Maybe it only takes you 5 minutes, who knows, and just write down the names of 5 companies that shoot footage for your reel that you might consider shooting with. You don't even need to do any in-depth research or look at what their prices are. All you need to do is just write down the companies, and then on day 2, then you could come back and look up what their pricing is or what they offer, So the point is that you're just taking tiny little action steps, but you're doing at least one action step every single day. I call it a singular task, and I use this strategy myself. So every day I email myself. I send an email to myself that I'll open up the next day, and I'll say, so the task to complete is X. And so let's say I'm working on something to grow my business, and I want to create a new package offering for something, right? Maybe my singular task that I'll email to myself to look at the next day is going to be an idea of come up with 3 possible ideas of what to offer in the new package. So then the next day comes, I see that email, and I come up with those 3 ideas. And then I email myself the next step, and I'll say, okay, maybe my next step, what would make the most sense towards creating this new offering is to put prices on what I could charge for each of these 3 possible options, right? And so that's my next step for the next day. And that's the only thing that I need to accomplish each day. So it's a very small, manageable, easy to accomplish thing that you can do. And the whole idea is you're being super consistent, okay? And you're doing one tiny thing per day. And pretty soon, after a few weeks, it's like you've accomplished so much stuff because it's hardly taken any time and you've just been doing it instead of putting it off. So to summarize, you see, the whole process I just outlined is fairly simple when broken down like this, but it's highly strategic. Okay, as a summary, step 1 is to get inspired again. Stop letting yourself get caught up in the day-to-day. Figure out what you really want long-term and get clear on it. Step 2 is figure out where you want to be a year from now so that it feels more manageable but still exciting. Step 3 involves doing a bit of research. You want to write down all kinds of possible steps that you could take to make that goal happen. You're not going to take all of these steps, but you might need to take 10% of them. Okay, step 4 is making notes on those steps to see how doable they are and how much sense each of them actually makes when you're considering them critically. Step 5 is to organize the steps into a logical order of what is most important to do first. And then step 6, finally, is to take action, just doing one tiny little step per day. And as long as you're consistent, it's going to be easy and you won't skip it. And that's pretty much all it takes. You'll get unstuck pretty quickly and you'll be operating way more strategically and you'll find yourself reaching goals that you did not think possible. So before we wrap things up, I just want to briefly talk about my career coaching services for actors. I work with actors all over the world via Zoom to help them get unstuck and move their careers forward. I actually have 2 main offerings. One is an affordable email coaching program or mentorship program where I communicate with you through text and audio recordings via email. I also have a more in-depth Zoom coaching program where we meet live weekly and continue moving your career forward. If you have an interest in either of those, just shoot me an email at martin@cityheadshots.com. Again, that's Martin, Martin, at city, CITY, headshots with an S. So martin@cityheadshots.com. And I'm not a hard selling type of person. So you just send me an email, say like, hey, I'm just curious about this. What do you charge? How does it work? I'll send you some info. I'm not going to be pushy or anything. I just like to chat. I'm very friendly, so feel free to reach out if you want to learn more. And that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for listening today. As always, all I have is one ask, which is if you have not already, please subscribe to the show so you don't miss future episodes. And subscribing also helps me promote the show because it makes the episodes more easily findable for other actors who might benefit from them as well. Thanks so much, and I will see you soon.